What three key changes were just made to the FICO credit scoring formula? How can the FICO changes help you rebuild your credit? And what is a stock market correction? And why should you care? We'll answer these questions and more on this, the 97th episode of the DoughRoller podcast.
Welcome to the DoughRoller podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Hey, everybody, this podcast is sponsored by Betterment, the most preferred automated investing service. Betterment has cutting-edge technology to optimize returns, minimize taxes, and save you time and money. Join over 34,000 customers who have already streamlined their portfolio management at betterment.com/roller. That's betterment.com/ROLLER. So on Friday, I'm recording this podcast on a Sunday. So 2 days ago, I went to the chess club. I try to be a big chess player. I try to play as much as I can. I played a lot in college and law school, and then went probably 10 or 15 years without playing much chess at all, certainly no tournament chess. And more recently, I've gotten back into it, and I go to the chess club on Friday nights as much as I can. And if you're not into chess, you don't really get it, but if you are, then you do. So on Friday, I'm rated about 2,000, which again, if you're not into chess, means absolutely nothing to you, and that's fine. But I'm rated about 2,000, which, among chess players is okay. There's certainly plenty of chess players at the club that are much, much better than I am. And so on Friday, I went to the club, and we had a tournament where you play 3 games, and you use a chess clock to time the game, and each side is given 30 minutes. You have to finish the game in 30 minutes. Each side has 30 minutes, so the whole game can go an hour. But as you get towards the end and you're about to run out of time, the games get really fast as you're trying to finish the game and hopefully win. Because if your clock expires, then you lose. It doesn't matter. You could be just about ready to checkmate your opponent. It doesn't matter. If your clock runs out before you make your last move, you lose the game. And of course, the way it works is when it's your move, your clock is running, and your opponent is not. You make your move, you push a button, it stops your clock, starts his or her clock. And so we were playing in this tournament, and I won the first game and against a lower rated player. And then I lost the second game against a much higher rated player. And so for the third game, I'm sitting across a 12-year-old. And I've gotten kind of used to this because the reality in chess is, and I love to see it, is that the kids that play chess they soak in the information. It's unbelievable how quickly they learn and how fast they can analyze a chess position. And so, it's almost like I'm intimidated by the 12-year-olds in the club because they just can think through these positions so incredibly fast. So this kid was phenomenal. And we ended up playing to a draw on a game where I actually lost a knight for 2 pawns because I blundered, and he saw it and took advantage of it. But then I fought back, and I got a draw. And afterwards, of course, you shake hands, and I told him he played a very, very good game. And he asked me, we talked a little bit about the game, but I kind of just recount this. I don't know why I'm telling you this story. It's really got nothing to do with money or investing. I guess just a little bit of my life for what it's worth. But I really admired this 12-year-old chess player, and kind of wish I'd have gotten into the game at that age. Frankly, I wish I'd have been doing a lot of things much, much early in life. And, in some ways, I guess there is a correlation to investing. Boy, the earlier you start, the better. I mean, I wish parents would get their children involved in saving and investing. A lot of parents do. But because, I talk to people in their 40s who haven't done any of this and are just scared to death of it. But, if you've been investing since you were 15, by the time you're in your 20s or 30s, it's going to be like chess is to this 12-year-old. It's just second nature to him already. Can you imagine if he keeps playing when he's 20? He could be a grandmaster if he wanted to be. So maybe there's a correlation to finance or investing. But I get a kick out of these young kids that play the game, play it very well. And certainly he is one of them, and it was a lot of fun. I'm kind of glad I got a draw, though. I thought I was going to lose the game, which, by the way, wouldn't be the first time I lost to someone much, much younger than I am, and I'm sure it won't be the last. All right, well, that's not what this podcast is about. We're going to talk about a couple of things, mainly related to the FICO score, because FICO's come out with FICO 9, their latest version of their credit scoring formula, or algorithm, I guess. And there's some big changes in it that could affect you, particularly if you're working to rebuild your credit and you're struggling with some debt, maybe some items in collection, where the lender has turned them over to a collection agency, and maybe you've paid them off, maybe you haven't, you're working on it. Anyway, some big changes. Going to run through those for the main part of the show. Before I get to that, though, I had an interesting question actually from my associate pastor, who wanted to know, the stock market's been down kind of. It was up on Friday, but it's been down. And he wanted to know, is this the correction? Is this the correction that everyone keeps talking about that will come around sooner or later? And my response, he texted me this question. So, my answer would be the same to you or to anyone that asked me that. It's an easy question for me to answer. And my answer was simple. I don't know. That's my answer. I have no idea. But I thought, it's worth taking a couple of minutes to talk about this. First of all, what's the definition of a market correction? And generally, I don't know if this is written down officially anywhere, but it's usually a drop of 10% or more in a key index, like take the S&P 500. So if it were to go into a correction, it would drop by more than 10% from its last high, whatever that would be. And so we technically haven't hit a correction yet. I don't know the exact number. I think it may be down about 5% off its high. But in any event, we've not technically hit a correction. We could. I don't know what the future holds for the market. So we certainly could hit a correction now, or maybe not. There was an interesting article on CNN that said it's been 1,042 days since the last S&P 500 was in a technical correction. And of course, they had to point out that since then, Hollywood's had a chance to churn out 3 different X-Men movies. So I guess the point is, it's been a while. Corrections are great, particularly if you're not spending your money. If you're not spending your investments, corrections are wonderful because they lower the price of stocks, lower the price of mutual funds, right? And they can be scary, particularly if the corrections turn into something even more severe. But when you think about it, when you're making those monthly contributions to your 401k or your annual contributions to your IRA, if the market is lower, your money will go further. You'll be able to buy more shares of individual stocks, or if, like probably most of you, you're investing in mutual funds or ETFs, you're going to get more bang for your buck. You're going to get more of your share of a mutual fund, which of course holds the underlying stocks or bonds. In this case, we're talking stocks. For that same contribution. By the way, though, it has other impacts. I've started a series on dividend investing, which I'll have another episode on that on the next show. But as you're reinvesting your dividends, which for most of us happens automatically, you don't even see it happen. A stock or mutual fund, there issues dividends and they just get reinvested. But if the price of the stock or the price of the basket of stocks in the mutual fund are lower because we're in, say, a stock market a correction, that dividend that you reinvest will buy more, right? The other way it can help us is if the companies are buying back their own stock, which happens frequently, and they usually are pretty bad at it. That's maybe a topic for another episode. But you'll get more bang for your buck if, when they're buying their own shares back, they're paying a lower price, right? So corrections can be painful, but really for long-term wealth building, they're fabulous. The other thing is, if you're new to investing, it can give you, like it or not, an opportunity to understand how you will react to a down market. Now, a bear market, say it goes down 20% or more, really tests your mettle. That's really how you can see how you'll react. But particularly for new investors, when you see this correction, you go through a period where the market is down, it's really important to use that as an opportunity to see how you're going to react to a bad market. And hopefully you've got a solid asset allocation plan and you're going to stick to it in good markets and bad. But the correction, like it or not, it gives you a chance to figure out how you're going to react. And then, you can hopefully learn from it. Maybe you don't react as well as you'd like, and you end up selling or making some changes when maybe you shouldn't have. Okay, but hopefully you learn from it. And I've talked to a lot of people who learned a lot from the 08, 09 markets. Most of them hate themselves for having sold their stocks and then watched the market go up and then missed out. So in any event, that is a stock market correction, and I think they can be very good. And they are very good for investors. They can be a little painful and a little scary, but there you go. That's my take on a market correction. Okay, so the main topic for today, the FICO changes. So Fair Isaac Corporation, or Fair Isaac Corp, which is the company that owns the top secret FICO formula, came out with a press release earlier this month. This is August 2014 for those that might be listening to this podcast months or even years later. And they announced that there were kind of three big changes. And I'm sure there were others, but they highlighted three changes to this FICO formula. They're calling it FICO 9. They have a numbering system, but it gets a little complicated. The point is there are multiple versions of the FICO score. And as you can imagine, the goal of FICO from a lender perspective is to give the lender, whether it's a bank, credit card company, mortgage company, a company that makes school loans available, whatever, a way to evaluate a potential borrower. And you can have problems with this credit scoring formula in one of two ways, right? Either it can miss individuals who should have been flagged as a credit risk, and the result is maybe the lender allows them to borrow money they shouldn't have, and then it increases the lender's the cost for defaults, right? But the other problem is maybe there are some people out there that really would be good borrowers, but for some reason, the credit scoring formula flags them as a real risk, and maybe more of a risk than they really are. And that could result in either denial of a loan, or maybe not a denial, but they misprice it. Maybe it causes a lender to charge them more than maybe they otherwise should have been charged. And so, you can kind of miss either way with the credit scoring formula. And so, as you might expect, the folks at Fair Isaac are constantly refining this and testing it and using data to back test it and to try to get sort of the perfect formula. And no formula is going to be perfect. No credit scoring formula can be perfect, but they're constantly trying to make it better. And of course, that's important for consumers too. I mean, if you get sort of flagged as maybe a huge credit risk when you really aren't, that's no good. We don't want that. You're either going to get denied for a loan, or maybe you're going to get higher rates than you should have otherwise received. So to that end, they've made three changes. I'm going to run through those today and tell you a little bit more about kind of how this is going to get implemented. So the first change has to do with unpaid debt that goes to collection. So, you have, let's say, a credit card that you don't pay. Credit card company, tries to get it resolved. Maybe it doesn't get resolved. Eventually, they turn it over to a collection agency. And normally, before FICO 9, late payments like this showed up on your credit score, your credit report, and affected your credit score for 7 years. Big impact. And it lasts for 7 years. Now, one thing about it was, as that late payment aged, as it got further and further away, it would impact your credit score less and less. So the impact wasn't the same. A late payment a month ago would hurt your score more than the exact same late payment that was, say, 5 years ago you made a late payment. It would still affect your score, though. It wouldn't affect it as much as a more recent late payment, but it would still lower your credit score. And in fact, I had Tom Quinn on the show, who is the credit expert at FICO, the guy. And he was terrific, answered a lot of questions. That was podcast 2. You can check that out if you want, DoughRoller.net/podcast 2. And we talked about this in that show, in this 7-year sort of rule for late payments. Well, here's the deal. When a debt gets sent to collection, and let's assume you pay it. You recognize you owe the money. Maybe you struggled for a bit. You finally got the money together and you paid it off, and you no longer owe the money. Well, under the old scoring formula, that's good. That's going to help you. But those late payments that preceded paying off that debt were still going to hurt your credit score. Well, not now. Not under FICO 9. If you pay off that debt in full that perhaps the collection agency had been hounding you for, if you pay them off and you no longer owe the debt, then it will not hurt your credit score. You don't have to wait out the 7 years. That's the first change, and a big change a really, really big change. And I guess for whatever reason, Fair Isaac determined that keeping that keeping those late payments still affecting your score even after you pay off the debt resulted in a score that was really lower than your real credit risk. But for whatever reason, that was the change that they made, the first of 3 changes. And again, if you've been struggling to try to build your credit, maybe you had some financial issues in the past, I think it's, of course, we don't have access to the data and the formulas and all that, but just, kind of thinking it through, it seems to me like a really good change. Because sometimes people go through a rough patch, but then they get things worked out and they pay off the debt, and why not start with a clean slate? So I think that's a really, really good change, particularly for those trying to rebuild their credit. The second change is also a big help. And what it is this. There are different kinds of debt, of course, right? You may have a car loan, school loan, credit cards, mortgage, whatnot, personal loan. And what FICO recognizes is that not all debt is created equal. And the way debt should affect your credit score should vary depending on the type of the debt. That concept is not particularly earth-shattering. But what they've done is said, look, there's a particular kind of debt out there that we think really shouldn't affect your credit score as much as other kinds of debt. What is it? Medical bills. So to the extent that you have unpaid medical debt, will it hurt your score? Yeah, and the amount of debt can, even if you're paying it on time, the amount of debt still might have an impact on your score. But what FICO's come out and said is, look, we recognize that medical debt is kind of just different. It's a lot different than if you're running up your credit cards, going on vacations, and buying expensive electronics. That reflects a certain type of approach to credit, right? But if you've had a medical issue and you've been forced to, obviously get treatment or whatever, and you've built up a lot of medical debt, maybe you're paying it off, but you've got this big amount of debt on your credit file. That doesn't necessarily reflect someone who is not controlling, not managing their finances well. That could be something that occurred outside of the individual's control. Obviously, a lot of health issues are like that, and you're trying to manage it as best you can. But they recognize that medical bills are different. It's a different kind of debt. And what they said, and I'm just going to quote from their release, they said, the median FICO score for consumers whose only major derogatory references are unpaid medical debts is expected to increase by 25 points. So in other words, under this new formula, all other things being equal, if you were hurt by unpaid medical bills, they're not saying it won't have any effect on your score, but the effect's going to be lessened, and as a result, your score could go up by about 25 points. Now, 25 points may not seem like a lot, but trust me, depending on exactly where your score is and what you're trying to accomplish, 25 points can make a huge difference. It can make a huge difference on a mortgage, for example. And since that's the kind of debt that you tend to carry for a very, very long time, even small changes in interest rates multiplied over years of a mortgage can make a huge difference. So that 25 extra points could qualify you for a better rate on a mortgage, a better rate on car loans. It might get you that 0% balance transfer card where before you couldn't. So, it's a pretty significant change. And like the first change regarding debts that you pay off that were in collection, I think this is a very good change as well. I was happy to see this because medical debt is different. Medical bills are just a really different kind of debt, and people get into heavy medical debts for very different reasons than they do car loans, for example. So that's the second change, and again, I think it's a very good one. The third and final change is one where they didn't give a lot of credit, a lot of detail on this change, but I can tell you what it is, and here it is. So one of the challenges FICO has and borrowers have is when they have a consumer that wants a loan and they don't have much credit history. They refer to it as limited credit history. Sometimes they'll refer to it as a thin file, meaning their credit history is real thin. There's not a lot on there. Maybe you're just getting started out. You haven't borrowed a lot of money, and so you have a thin file. How do you evaluate someone's credit risk when they don't have a lot of history? Well, that's a real challenge. And one of the things, of course, FICO looks at for everybody is repayment history. It's the single most important factor in calculating the FICO score. Do you pay your bills on time? Well, In the past, they would look at this as kind of black and white. You're either paying your bills on time or you're not, right? Now, of course, the impact on your score would depend on a lot of factors, like how many late payments do you have, how long has this lasted, the type of loan. But what FICO came out and said is, we've figured out other ways to look at this besides just are the repayments on time or not. They didn't go into details. They didn't say how they're going to look at it differently. They've just said, look, we've got some more detail here. The way they put it was FICO data scientists represented a consumer's repayment behavior in degrees of risk. So the data scientists at FICO came up with a way to look at a consumer's repayment behavior in ways beyond just are they paying on time or not. Now, again, they didn't go into detail. But what does this mean? Well, I think it could mean, we'll have to see, but it could mean that folks with limited credit history may have a slightly better chance at getting qualified for credit than they would have under the old formulas. And this would be important to lenders too, by the way, because they don't want to turn away someone who's a good credit risk. It's just when you have as they call it, a thin file, it's just sometimes hard to figure out. And again, I'm sure those challenges still exist, but with FICO 9, it appears they've at least tackled some of those challenges. So that's the third change. So pretty significant changes to the FICO formula. Now, I think as far as I could tell, they all seem to be positive from what I've read. Now, that being said, two kind of, I guess, words of caution or explanation maybe. The first is this. Not all lenders are going to use this formula right away. Some lenders use older versions of the FICO formula, and the FICO's rolling this formula out in the fall. But it doesn't mean that overnight every credit card company, every auto company, every mortgage company is going to just immediately adopt FICO 9. If you think about it, there are a couple of reasons for that. One is it's expensive, right? I mean, they've got computer systems, they've got these credit scoring data plugged in. And to simply, it's not a matter of just let's just, hit a few buttons and take out the old formula and stick in the new one. It takes some time. The second thing is they have to test this. They have to make sure it's right for their company, whatever industry they're in, whatever, again, whether it's a credit card, a bank, whatever. And so they need to make sure that these changes to the FICO formula are consistent with their own underwriting standards. And that can take some time. Now, I suspect that, maybe not, but I would suspect that particularly for larger institutions, they're in constant communication with FICO on this. So I suspect none of this came as a surprise to, big lenders. And then they've been able to look at this sort of thing. Maybe they've even in some way had some input into this. I don't know. But the point is, these changes aren't going to happen overnight. So you could go try to get a credit card or a mortgage, say, in November, and they may or may not be using the FICO 9 formula. It will take some time for lenders to adopt it. And in fact, I read that the mortgage industry typically uses a FICO formula that's 2 versions old. So, there could be some that take quite a long time to adopt the FICO 9 formula. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, as I've mentioned before on the show, there are many different FICO credit scoring formulas. As I mentioned just a second ago, there are different versions of it. So, different lenders use older versions of the FICO formula. So that's the first thing. But the other thing is that there are industry-specific versions of the FICO algorithm. So credit cards could have a specific version. Auto loans, could have a different, slightly different version of the FICO formula specific to their industry. Mortgages as well. So there are different versions of the FICO formula, and so how the changes to the main FICO formula, if you will. I know, isn't this ridiculously crazy? Anyway, how they're going to change at an industry level is yet to be seen, and I hope these changes kind of get rolled out across all of the various versions of the FICO scoring formula, but that's yet to be seen. So I think overall, good development for credit scoring, but the changes are going to take some time. They're not going to happen overnight, and that's something that you need to keep in mind as you're trying to rebuild your own credit. It's also something to keep in mind if you want to get a copy or see your official FICO credit score. There are a couple of ways to do that. One is to go to MyFICO. And you can, if there's, you can go to MyFICO, you can get your FICO score. You do have to pay a fee. The problem with that is, I guess it's just something to realize is, you will get your credit score as generated by the FICO formula. But you could go out a week later and apply for a loan from a company that uses FICO, and they may look at a different score because they could be using an older version of the FICO formula. Maybe they're using an industry-specific version of the FICO formula. That's just sort of the reality that we're in. You'll have I think a good idea of where your credit stands, but you ought not think you're going to have the exact same score that a lender is going to look at. And that's true also if you have a credit card. A number of the credit card issuers, Barclay Card is one, Discover is another, I'm pretty sure, that provides you free access to your FICO credit score. Again, you could have the same issue though. That number that you see may not be exactly the same number that a lender sees. Again, it's going to, in all likelihood, be close, but it's rarely going to be the exact same thing. And I've seen that firsthand. When I apply to a mortgage, I get my FICO scores, and I'll immediately go check at my FICO just out of curiosity, and I don't think they've ever been the same. They've been close, but never the same. So just a kind of a few words of caution there, just to kind of keep all of this in perspective. But the changes were significant enough that I thought you ought to know about them. That's why I wanted to mention them in this episode. The show notes to this show, of course, DoughRoller.net/podcast 97, podcast 97. And I will include in the show notes links to pages on the site where you can see the various ways you can get your FICO score if you want to, as well as other versions of credit scores, like from the folks at Credit Sesame and Credit Karma, that can also be very helpful. But there you go. That's FICO 9. Those are the sort of key changes that will eventually, as these changes get adopted by lenders, could have a big impact on your credit score. There you go. Hey, hope you have a great day. Until next time, remember, the best thing money can buy, it's financial freedom.